So Pro Tools 2018.4, the lead point on that, I think we both agree, was the name change. Pro Tools HD is no more. It's now Pro Tools Ultimate.
Well, no more as in the sense of software, because we've still got Pro Tools HD in terms of hardware, in terms of the HDX range. So again, a slight little bit of confusion can come in, because HDX is still Pro Tools HD hardware, but in terms of the software, where we had the Pro Tools HD standalone software, if you like, all the software that you use with the Pro Tools HDX hardware, yes, that's now called Pro Tools Ultimate.
And hopefully that's going to reduce the confusion, because since Pro Tools HD became a hardware and a software product simultaneously, there's been some horrible tortured language trying to draw the distinction, and hopefully this will help.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just a name change, though, was it?
No, so two things.
Go on.
Two things came in. We had they bundled machine control, which is something that I haven't used for years and years and years, going back to the days where effectively we were acquiring content on D88s or timecode DAT machines, and I would be track laying in from those machines using machine control to basically lock Pro Tools to a machine, so I can bring the audio in. But of course,
it's still relevant in now. Nearly all of us, aren't using tape anymore.
Indeed,
that was an interesting thing. Tell us about that, Mike.
Yeah. So the interesting thing that came with machine control, and what it's tending to be used for now, is locking Pro Tools to a large form console, not control surface, but console. So if you've got something like a Neve DFC1, where all the automation is effectively triggered from timecode, you can now lock your DFC to Pro Tools. And that is really, really clever application for what is effectively a piece of software that's very long in the tooth.
So apart from the people who've got 50-foot long Harrison consoles on huge dubbing stages and stuff, potentially this could be, because it's included at no cost, correct?
Yes.
So in that case, for those people who, for example, have a suitably equipped live console, digital console, there's maybe the option of bringing that in, experimenting with Pro Tools, doing something that previously you might not have tried because of the burden of having to buy an optional extra.
Yeah, or anything, effectively anything that you have that works off timecode, where you wouldn't have necessarily been prepared to spend the money on buying machine control. It was something like $750 for the software. Now it's included in Ultimate. You might well think, oh, well, actually, I could lock that up to Pro Tools, because essentially it's working off timecode.
So more useful than I thought when I first read about this in the release. It's actually it's for more people than just the people who are working on kind of big dub stages and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay. So that's two things now. We've got the we've got the name change and we've got machine control.
And they've bundled the Avid Complete Plug-in Bundle into Ultimate. So as long as you keep your subscription up to date, you have access to 75 plus plugins. And that's what we're going to take a look at right now, is just taking a look through some of the plugins, because there are 75. We're not going to talk about every single one, but we're going to go through them in groups and really pick up the ones that mean something to us, or we find useful, or we know that there's a really good use for. So what's the first collection today, Jim?
Well, I think we might as well go alphabetically. So if we start with the Air instruments, let's go Air instruments. Actually, Air, as we know, they've long time. But well, I mean, this blog, started life as the Air instrument user blog. So I've used these a lot. I suspect I might have used these more than you, Mike, considering our kind of respective
workflows.
Yeah. For me,
what's the standout?
The standout. I'm a big fan of Expand, and I think it's very underrated, just because it's that whole thing about things that are free and romplers. It's kind of quite an old-fashioned way of doing things in hardware. Maybe it's got associations with digital synth workstations from years ago, but it sounds really good. That one, if Velvet were in there, and it's not, that is my all-time favourite Air instrument, absolutely.
But that's one
not
has to pay for.
and you should, because it is still absolutely my favourite electric piano. But I'm probably gonna go with Expand, which is a slightly dull answer. But
No,
that's my favourite.
it's fine. The only thing that I want to flag up in this group of Air virtual instruments is the Air DB33, which has this great, really useful Leslie cabinet emulation. So effectively, you can use it as a plugin that does nothing but the Leslie cabinet emulation. So it's not a Hammond organ, which of course is the other half of it. We featured this in an article quite a long time ago, in fact, nearly 5 years ago, entitled 5 Free Avid Plugins Pro Tools Users Should Check Out. And we highlighted it because of this feature of being able to separate out the Leslie cabinet emulation. So for me, that's the standout.
It's a good cabinet emulation. I remember I used that. I put bass through that in one of the very first videos I made on Pro Tools Expert. 10 free plugins you can use for bass guitar. And yeah, it's a distinctive sound on bass. It's not one that I'd use every day. Also, things like, instant sort of Pink Floyd type sounds if you're putting pianos and stuff through Leslie's. Fantastic. So yeah, other things can go through Leslie's other than organs.
So what's the next group?
I think we're going to have to talk about the Pro Series because these are worth the price of entry on their own. I think if they just bundled these, well, they did just bundle these before. Yeah. So I'll take that back. But these are the best on the list for me, and I suspect you're probably going to agree.
Yes, totally agree. For me, the two that I use all the time are the Pro Compressor and the Pro Limiter. They are more often than not my go-to plugins for limiting and compression. The Pro Limiter, of course, also has the advantage that it has a loudness meter in it, an EBU R128 loudness meter built into it, with a histogram, which again is, some of the cheaper loudness meters don't have that histogram, so you can see what's happened to the history of the loudness over a period of time. So those two, absolutely. Subharmonic I've used very occasionally when I've wanted to do something to the bottom end or something.
Yeah, might step back from Subharmonic. We might be talking about that in a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Shall I go? Is it
yeah, go for it.
Excellent. So in that case, Pro Subharmonic, I've really, really come round to more and more these days. I'm always interested in things that can help out a lack of bottom end. And I did a tutorial video on Pro Subharmonic, and one of the overlooked features is that you can control it via MIDI as well, which is really, really interesting and opens up some real possibilities. And you can use it effectively as a sub-oscillator for any MIDI-controlled source. But the thing that I use it for all the time is just preposterously over-the-top kick drums. If you've got a kick drum it's amazing how easy it is to put a bass-heavy microphone into a bass drum and capture not enough bass. But if that's happened to you, this will sort it out no problem. Just make sure that you're monitoring on something that can reproduce that bass, because you can end up with an awful lot down there that you might not know was there if you're not using adequate monitoring. If I've got another one, I'm probably going to say Pro Expander, which is a little bit dull. Possibly an expander. How exciting can it be? Well, the main thing for me on this is that it's the only thing that I'm aware of in Pro Tools that offers a true ducker. And I've been doing some things with ducking recently. I discovered recently a really useful technique for sidechaining a ducker to eliminate spill on drum mics rather than gating, which was really effective, really, really good. And I wouldn't have been able to do it very easily without something that did true ducking as opposed to sidechain compression, like Pro Expander.
Yeah. Okay, where do we go next? Reverbs, presumably.
We can go Reverbs.
Yeah.
Okay. There's not many, though. Actually, it's a surprisingly thin category. We have excluded, I categorised these, and there's a couple of Reverbs in the package that I've kind of categorised as being...
Well, they're more stomp box type things,
for guitar. Yeah. So if you're thinking what about, well, if it might be in a later category. Okay. So I'm going to start on this.
Go on, then.
I'm going to say... I think I'm going to say Revibe, just because I really got into Revibe on TDM systems, the old silver face version, and I just thought it was a very nice reverb. Admittedly, this was coming from kind of like my using Deverb on TDM systems and stuff, and it's easy to be better than Deverb.
Yes.
But the thing I like about this is, especially with the new format, is that I like it's one of the perfect examples of the new kind of standard dark grey, tall, thin UIs, because there's an awful lot to play with in there. There's detailed control of the filters and the early reflections versus the tail and all of that. But if you want to fold all that stuff away and just deal with the kind of pre-delay and decay, that kind of deal with it on that kind of level, then it's right there in front of you. But I think Reverbs basically survive off based on their presets. I have no issue with using reverb presets, whereas there's most other plugin categories I'm kind of like a little bit averse to using them. But great presets and good smaller spaces. What about you, Mike, anyway?
I think probably if I had to name one of them, it would be Revibe 2. I did start doing quite a lot of work back in the day, early TDM times when these first came out. Revibe, the original one, and then the Reverb 1 were often my go-to plugins. But of course, I have to flag up and say this is pre-exponential audio days. But of course, I still need these, because if I open up old legacy sessions, there is the plugin, and up it comes. And there is a sort of application. Sometimes in radio documentaries, I need to get a sort of a sense that this piece of content happened a long time ago. And I've got a setting now on Revibe 2 that gives me this sort of very ethereal, quite long reverb decay time, but the audio, the speech is still intelligible enough. And that now has again become, oh yes, okay, so we need to create that sort of message. Then out it comes, because I've built this preset, and it's so often in post especially, we need to be able to get good results very quickly, and that does it for me. If you haven't, moving on to space, it's a useful convolution reverb, and all right, yes, there are plenty of other convolution reverbs out there, but bearing in mind this is now effectively coming at no additional cost with Pro Tools Ultimate, it's a useful convolution reverb, and most importantly, one that you can put your own impulse responses into. Very true.
I tend to use space because it's got quite a nice spring reverb impulse in it, and I don't have. That's my kind of go-to spring reverb.
Right.
I've used that one quite a bit. Back to Revibe, just very briefly. Something I haven't mentioned there is that, of course, Revibe is very capable surround reverb.
Yeah.
And they're not necessarily as all reverbs don't do surround. Put it that way.
No.
And that one does, so it's kind of worth mentioning.
And of course, as an HDX user, all the three of them all will work on my DSP cards, which again is not that usual for reverb plugins. They're native plugins by their very nature. So yeah.
Okay, I think I'm going to have to find out what your favourite guitar plugin is now, because obviously, as the notorious shredder that you are, Mike.
Yeah.
So what about guitar plugins? We've got a couple of
things
are they? That some people might not know, might not assume were in there. For example, Studio Reverb.
Yeah.
I put in there because it's one of the ones from the 11 rack hardware. So
and also we've got quite a few of the Stompbox type things in there, which again is just a whole territory that I just have never been in. That's back in the day, more often than not, when I was doing music tracks that did involve guitars, then and again I'm going to show it was the old Line 6 plugin, the TDM plugin, and it was
Amp
like
Farm.
Yeah, that's the one. But it's not, again, that sort of style of content has not been in my workflow for that amount of time. So yes, it's going to be
However,
very
you
quiet.
can use the stomps for other stuff, though.
Of course you can.
We've got some content on the site demonstrating that.
Absolutely.
Anything, go on, you've got to nominate one of them. What's it going to be?
I cannot nominate one of them because I have never used any of them.
That's very honest and very disappointing. I'm going to recommend one to you.
Go for it.
Just because the first thing I'd say is I love 11 Mark II.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. If you're using guitars, I think there is nothing wrong with it. I mean, there's so many good alternatives out there, but the one that ships with Pro Tools is really capable. And my biggest complaint about it for years was it had no bass amps, and it now does. So great. I would happily use 11 Mark II.
Yeah.
The one that I'm going to have to choose is BBD delay because I love Bucket Brigade delays.
Right.
And this one's really good. And I use it over tape echo usually, actually, just because the delays are just so much worse, which in delay can be a really good thing. So yeah, I just love it. It just puts this cloud of terrible audio around some clean sound. And yeah, it does exactly what it should. So that's the one I'm going to go with.
Excellent.
There's some other good ones on there, but that's where I'd start.
Okay. We need to move on. So the category marked Air stuff.
Well, this is audio plugins as opposed to instruments. So the ones that I think they first came out with Pro Tools 8. We got all these kind of like shiny new black standard UI green LED plugins. Not somewhere I go a lot, but there's a couple of things that I do really value in there. I could definitely pick a couple.
Go for it.
All right. Well, I'm going to have to start with the stereo width plugin.
Yes.
Which I never ever use to widen anything, but I've said very publicly the single most useful thing that I've ever learned from all of my association with Pro Tools Expert was long before I was a member of the team, and it was setting the stereo width plugin to -100%, so it's mono. So it's mono, and then using it as a mono button on your master fader.
Yeah, and in fact,
once you've got your head around the idea around that you're bypassing it, your bypass works the wrong way round.
Yes,
it's absolutely brilliant.
And in fact, back in 2016, it was your favourite from the Air Creative Collection effects, as it was known then. That was the one that you highlighted. So top marks.
This
for
does sound like something I'd say. Yeah. So what about yours, though, Mike?
Okay,
have you got any?
You've taken both of mine,
the best ones
already.
Yeah.
So the one that I'm going to highlight that's left is the Air Enhancer, simply because obviously we've got lots of enhancer, harmonic enhancer type plugins, but of course the thing to bear in mind is that the Avid Aphex and Big Bottom plugins are not included in the Avid Complete Bundle. So if you do need some form of harmonic enhancer type plugin, for the Aphex brightening or whatever, then the Little Air Enhancer plugin is well worth looking at before you start spending money in that direction.
I don't think I've ever even opened it, so I'm going to check it out. It's a good tip. Okay, so we better go on to what is our last last category.
The everything else, really, I think is.
Yeah. I mean, in here, when I was putting this together, things that didn't fit anywhere else.
Yes.
And in here we have, I mean, it's not a long list, so going down the list, we've got Sound Replacer, Telray Variable Delay, if you remember that, Impact, so SSL Bus Compressor, the Focusrite D2 and D3, Smack, that sort of vintagey looking compressor,
Horrible.
The Joe Meek bundle, the Muga Fuga bundle, Classic Compressors bundle, Pultec bundle, Real Tape Suite, X-Form, and the Voce bundle.
Yeah.
So mostly Bomb Factory actually in there.
Yes,
kind of
which
like
again sort of gives a clue as to their antiquity. Or
I'm thinking the Bomb Factory stuff. That's kind of like 2002, 3, something like that.
If not earlier.
I mean, these are not young plugins.
No.
But is there anything in there that we still rate?
Okay, so there's two that. Well, there's two that I want to flag up from this this group. The first is X-Form. Now, It's essentially for time compression and expansion. The thing about the TCE plugin that comes as standard with Pro Tools is it's actually it's an ancient algorithm, but it's absolutely brilliant on speech, but not particularly good on anything else, especially any form of music. So Avid came up with Xform, which largely and has was a plugin that you had to pay good money for to get, and you can use it on Elastic Audio and all sorts of other things, and it's actually not bad. But I think these days there is at least one plugin that completely supersedes it. And that is the Z-Plane AX Elastique, which you can now use on the time compression expansion section of Pro Tools. And as we've highlighted on the blog with some of Alan's demonstration content, is incredibly good quality. And more importantly, the process time is much, much quicker. So I highlight Xform in some respects. It's there, it has its uses, but I would strongly recommend you look at Z-Plane's AX Elastique to replace it. The other bundle that the other one in this sort of also ran section that I want to look at is the Classic Compressors bundle. And if you are into emulations of classic compressors, and I have to say I'm not. It's not part of my normal workflow. But if you are, then again, because this is bundled into Pro Tools, these are some well worth taking a look at in terms of some of the classic compressors that you might want to be able to have emulations for without spending lots more money.
Fair enough. I'm kind of struggling on this category a little bit, actually. I think I'm looking. It's between Smack and Impact probably. Now Smack, I've always found looks better than it sounds.
I
it's
think
not, and it's very easy. And it's always annoyed me that it seems very, very easy to clip.
Yes.
It's helpfully got a clip light, but that clip light's almost permanently on regardless of what you do. So I'm going to go with Impact, which I've used on TDM systems. And it's, I mean, yeah, why not, actually? It gives that familiar interface of an SSL bus compressor, which if you're used to using, you can kind of find what you want quickly. And it's transparent like one of those should be. And yeah, that'd probably be my one.
Yeah,
but, I had to dig in for that one.
Yeah, no, it's a good call because again, there's so many plugins now. If you're working multi-channel that don't have multi-channel versions, and this one is a bus compressor that will support up to 7.1. So that's a good call.
Yeah, and presumably that will run nicely on a HDX rig. So,
yeah.
So in that case, for those reasons, we'll go with that.
Indeed.
So that gets us to the bottom of the list.
It does.
In looking at the list as a whole, I think there's some useful additions on there actually, and there's some stuff. There is some stuff leaving the Pro compressor. Leaving the Pro plugins, the Avid Pro plugins to one side because they're, as we've already said,
stand out,
so good
yes.
that they're kind of like shouldn't be on the same list really, but. There's some really good stuff. If there's a category that I'd probably be spending most of my time in, I think the most fun to be had is probably in the guitar list with the stomps and stuff, because I do quite like that interface, and it takes me back to my really early days of recording with the full track and guitar pedals, and putting verse 2 of the entire mix through a flanger because I could. So
I think the other real potential bonus for having this complete plug-in bundle included with Pro Tools Ultimate is one of the problems we have in post, because sessions tend to be a lot more mobile, and therefore if you start using esoteric plugins, there's a very good chance when the project moves on to the next stage, so if you're a dialogue editor and moving on to the re-recording mixer to pull everything together, if you use some esoteric plugins, the chances are they may not have those. And of course, essentially, anybody who has Pro Tools Ultimate who is on a current upgrade plan will have all of these plugins. So it's not quite, but it's getting to the point where this is a guaranteed list of plugins that anybody with an Ultimate system will have, and therefore you are much safer, if you like, to use these plugins than perhaps others.
So that's quite a good point to kind of conclude on, maybe.
Yeah.
That, we've got the heavyweight stuff in terms of kind of like things that you're going to use every session in the Pro Series, but if you want something that's a little bit more out there, it's quite viable shorthand.
Yeah.
If you're collaborating with someone, of just kind of this project, complete bundle only.
Yeah.
And everyone will understand what that means.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there we go. We hope that's been helpful to do a whistle-stop tour around the Avid Complete Bundle, which is now, as we say, included in with Pro Tools Ultimate, as long as you have a current upgrade plan, but also available quite cost-effectively for anybody else who would prefer to have access to all these plugins. So yeah, it's a very cost-effective solution, which basically for just under $50, $49.99 a year. So for an annual payment, you can get all these plugins. So even if you're on Pro Tools Native or even Pro Tools First for that matter, you can get access to all of these plugins, but it is, of course, on a subscription model. So you're paying just under $50 a year, or in the UK, we're now looking at £39 plus VAT. But even so, it's a lot of plugins for your money.
Sounds like a good point to finish on. So thanks for that, Mike. That's a little tour of that plugin bundle and our thoughts on Pro Tools 2018.4.